it is how much assistance you're giving a patient. So, if the patient is dependent or total assist, they're doing 0% of the transfer or the movement, whatever it is, whether it's bed mobility or whatever, and you're doing 100%, okay? Occasionally you'll hear max assist of 2. So max assist of 2 is a dependent patient, but you require 2 people to do it. And a lot of times clinicians will want to write max assist of 2 because they want the next therapist that comes to know that we need a second set of hands, because it's not going to be done by one person, okay? But max assist of 2 is a dependent or total assist transfer, okay? Max assist means the patient's doing less than 25%, you're doing more than 75% of it, okay? Mod assist is the patient's doing up to 50% and you're doing less than 50%, okay? Min assist is, they're doing almost 75% or you're doing 25% or less, okay? The contact guard assist, once you put hands on a patient, you are now contact guard, okay? Medicare now says that if you're contact guard, you're min assist, and it just has to do with pressure of our hands, is that giving them biofeedback and blah, blah, blah. So just know that contact guard assist is the same as min assist, okay? It's not really the same, but it's gonna be the same, if you have to score the patient. What?
I apologize.
No, you're fine. So it just means that you put hands on them. I like to say contact guard because sometimes I'm just touching them, but I'm not actually physically lifting. Once I'm lifting, I'm in min assist. Yes, ma'am.
You said that was for Medicare?
Medicare says, so if you have to score patients, so a lot of times now in skilled nursing facilities, they come in and they score the patient at the beginning of the hospital or their stay, and then they score them when they leave, and they're supposed to get reimbursed on how much they improve. Medicare says if you're doing that scoring, that contact guard and min assist are the same. In the therapy world, when we write our notes, we usually make those different, because if I'm lifting, that's min assist. But if I'm just got my hand on there because maybe they're impulsive and I'm not sure that I trust them yet, that's contact guard, okay? But Medicare says once you've touched them, that you're giving them min assist, okay? But a lot of therapists, most therapists there's a distinction between the two. Supervision is the same thing as standby assist, or it's abbreviated SBA. Patient's doing 100% and you're watching them. So my gait belt's still on them, but I let them do the transfer, okay? I'm just watching, maybe I'm cueing them, maybe they can physically do it, but mentally they're not safe, and so we have to say, hey, make sure you lock your brakes. Yes? Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard for me to see.
No, yeah, no. You're fine. I just don't like it in our presentation today. The book doesn't really get into like how much assistance people are, and I'm like, y'all don't even have heard these terms. You're not going to really know.
Text the picture to the group chat.
I don't want to be in the picture. Am I in the picture? Okay. Y'all are going to be like,
Smile.
yeah. And then there's modified independent. Modified independent means they're using an assisted device of some sort. So they're still doing 100% of it, but they're required some assisted device. So if I'm standing here and I need my cane to be able to walk, I'm considered modified independent, right? Or I use a walker, I'd be modified independent. And then independent, either I with a circle or abbreviated, is they're doing 100%, they're totally safe, they're you and I, right? That's independent. Okay. Here's our fish. All right, we're going to talk about lateral transfers. This is the overview. The general procedure should be a lift, shift, and lower with the gait belt, always. Most of these transfers require some kind of lift, shift, and lowering, okay? There's seated transfers where they're dependent, and there's a lateral lift. There could be a lateral seated transfer with or without a sliding board, for an anterior posterior transfer with or without a sliding board. There's pivot transfers that can be done standing or squatting. We can use assisted devices when we do our transfers. We don't get into a lot about our assisted devices. We'll do more with assisted devices when Gate comes here in a little while, in a couple of weeks. And then patient conditions that might change some of the ways we do our transfers. Those are gonna be our patients that are non-weight bearing, a patient that has a stroke, a total hip replacement, or a spinal cord injury. Sometimes we have to adjust our transfers due to the toilet, or maybe it's a car that they're going to use, and so it might change some of our transfer procedures, okay? First thing first, with all our transfers, plan ahead. So, you want to get all your equipment ready. You want to know how much assistance you're going to be needing. You want to make sure your patient has good socks on, so the grippy socks or shoes. Okay, regular socks are a no-no. Bare feet, no-no. All right, they've got to have either shoes on or the grip socks. Okay, you want to make sure that they lock the brakes to the wheelchair. You want to remove any obstacles that are going to be in the way, so maybe the armrest. And then we want the surfaces. An ideal transfer would be that the surfaces are the same height. So if the bed adjusts, try to get it close to the wheelchair height, right? Otherwise, lower is acceptable because we want to go downhill with gravity, right? When we do our transfer. Always use a gate belt, y'all. Always, always, always. The transfer is not considered complete until the patient is safe, they're comfortable, and they have to verbalize that they're comfortable, and that they are secure in that location, whether seated or they're laying down, it doesn't matter, and that they have a call light. Transfer is not completed, considered done until you give them a call light. Okay? Transfer with a gate belt. You don't put the gate belt against bare skin, right? Put it around their waist. But we want to make sure that they don't have any tubes, like feeding tube, colostomy bags, and right there. If they do, you go high. You go right underneath the armpits, okay? And then make sure when you take it off, you remove it carefully. There's a nice little picture of how you put it in first. You always put it in, this is the teeth side. It's just like a belt. You send it in, you want the teeth side to go in, then you go through and back to the other side, all right? We grip the belt from the back, so you reach your arms all the way through into the back, not on the sides or in the front, okay, when you're doing a transfer. You want to always be reaching in the back. Patients are going to complain, they're not going to want to put a belt on for you. I finally have learned the wording to say that makes them let you put the belt on. I will tell you what it is. If you say, they'll say, I'll go, I gotta put a belt on you today, and they'll say, no, I don't want to, you don't need that, I'm safe, I never fall. You say, I'm gonna lose my job. You say, this is a company policy, and they will literally fire me if I don't put a belt on you. They will automatically be like, okay, I feel guilty, I'll put the belt on. I don't want her to lose her job. So you say that, then they let you put a belt on, and you move on, okay? I don't want you guys to have to defend in court that somebody fell and you didn't have a belt on them. So think about this. If you get somebody up, they had a belt on, and the patient goes down on you, it will happen. It's going to happen to me. If you have a belt on, you can lower them, right? We can control their fall. You can lower them down instead of them just hitting. And if you have to defend that in court, they'll say, did you take every precaution possible? And if you're able to say, yes, I put a belt on them, then you're not going to be found liable for that, right? But if you didn't put a belt on them and they hit the floor, there's a whole lot more issues, okay? A belt technically does not prevent a fall. Remember, it can help you control lowering them, okay? I had a lady, she started to go down on me. I grabbed her, I lunged forward, set her on my knee, screamed for help. It was a COVID room. Of course, we're all gowned up. It's a nightmare. And I'm holding her. I hold her as long as I can. I'm not going to be able to tolerate and hold her much longer. I've been screaming, nobody's coming. And I told her, I was like, I'm gonna have to lower you to the floor. And so then you just drop your leg back and you just slowly lower them down. Okay, and she ended up sitting on my foot. I didn't move until help got in the room. And then, you know, the patient's fine, that it was considered a control lowered at that point, right? She's not a fall, I lowered her. Okay, so you want that belt on. All right. Seated dependent repositioning. So I don't particularly love this. There's two ways to do this. The other way is presented a little bit later in the lecture. For this one though, this is their hips aren't back in the chair. So the goal is to get their hips back. We need them to be back against the backrest, right? So that they're supported. So the clinician reaches their arms down and through underneath the armpits. The patient will have their arms crossed. You reach in and down, and then you do a lift and pull them back in the chair. I particularly don't love that because it's a lot of strain on my back. So I don't love this, but we will teach it to you because you're supposed to know it. So you're gonna learn it, okay? But there's another way to do this as well. Dependent lateral lift transfer. So for this one, this is the only time the chair needs to be parallel to the bed. You want the chair needs to be parallel. You take the armrest off, you take your leg rest off, make sure your brakes are set, right? And then your patient's still gonna have a gait belt on. You're gonna have the patient do what the previous picture showed where they cross their arms. The clinician in the back will reach down and through. They straddle the wheel of the chair, and then the other clinician is going to help lift those legs. This should be a one continuous motion movement. This shouldn't be, I got the legs up, and then the person in the back's like, okay, I got the, you know, we don't want them, we want one smooth move over. So the person in back is in charge, and they're doing the count, okay? And remember, your wheelchair would be parallel, and kind of makes sense why, right? Because we want this to be a smooth movement over. So on most of our other transfers, you get a 30-degree angle with the wheelchair up. This one we want it smooth, so they go parallel beside each other. All right. We don't typically do this one a lot. The only time I've had to do this is to help nursing out. They needed help moving somebody, and so I ended up helping. This isn't really functional for us, right? What's the patient doing in this? They're not really doing anything, so it's not considered functional. So I don't suspect that you guys will do this very often, okay? Here's a one-person dependent lateral lift transfer. It's used for spinal cord injuries. You have them tuck their head down. Underneath your arm, you weight shift them forward. Their weight gets onto their feet, and then using momentum, you will then transfer them over to the mat or the bed, okay? You gotta really watch your body mechanics. They should have a gait belt on. You don't hold on to the gait belt during this. You actually usually put your hands underneath their butt. The alternative is you could use a towel or a sheet. There's a video I included if you want to watch it done with a sheet. You just slide the sheet under, and that way you have leverage for lifting. The key to this is your momentum and getting the weight shifted onto their feet. When the weight gets shifted forward onto their feet, it's coming toward you, and then you can do a quick momentum turn and transfer pivot, okay? We'll practice this one in the lab. You will use this for like a spinal cord injury, okay? Most people though don't love having their heads down like that. And so most of our population won't tolerate this, so you don't see it used a lot. The only time I've ever seen it used is a new spinal cord injury. And again, sometimes we're transferring patients, and it's, let's say they just got to Rogers C. Peace and you work at Rogers C. Peace. You might need to transfer them to the mat to be able to start working on stuff, right? So we might do this. But this isn't a long-term functional thing for them. So eventually we've got to be able to teach them a different way to do a transfer, right? But it is a transfer that you do need to know. All right. Seated anterior posterior transfer. It's straightforward. I think of it as perpendicular. I'm going to flip it to the next slide, and I'll just read this slide to y'all. But it makes a little bit more sense when you see the pictures. This patient should be an amputee or spinal cord injury. If you think about it, if you didn't have your limbs right here and you're trying to go from this chair to over to the bed, if you go and make it the chair perpendicular to the bed, you would then be able to just do some push-ups, right? To be able to move forward and scoot forward onto the next surface, okay? So it's usually used for either a spinal cord injury or for our amputees, our bilateral amputees. The thing is though, it requires a lot of upper body strength, right? But it usually can be done independently. And if I do have to help, you're gonna go to one side to help, okay? So you would stand on this side to help, and then either have a clinician on the other side. You don't wanna help from back because you would be leaning over that chair, all right? So let's say it wasn't going too great with that anterior posterior transfer. So if you're worried about the gap, or the gap is really big, or they don't seem to have a lot of good upper body strength, what you can do is put the sliding board underneath them, and they can do that same type of transfer forward or backwards onto the surface. So if they were on the bed, you would have them scoot back, right? But you have the board between to make the gap for those two, okay? I've done that when my wheelchair height was a little different, and it was a pretty big gap for the lady, and it was like, she's like, oh, I'm really good. And I'm like, I don't really know. And she was bilateral amputee. And I was like, I'm just gonna give you the board and let you try it on the board, and that way you have a place to stop, right, and rest. So it's a good safety thing. All right, independent sliding board transfers. So what you need to do for these, the patient will lean away. You will slide the board underneath their ischial tuberosity. If they're doing it independently, they would do that. It goes underneath their butt, right? And then they can transfer themselves over. Remember that the boards might cause some kind of friction, right? So sometimes powder is put on the board, or you might wear some clothes to decrease the friction. Most patients take several times to complete the transfer, and slight height difference between the two surfaces is going to be okay, because the board will help them with that, okay? So if you watch this gal is leaning over, right? She's sliding the board in. She's going to take several times to go over, and then once she gets to the chair, she's able to take the board out. This can also be done with us helping. We would be in front. We could block the legs. We can also weight shift her forward so that she can slide her hips easier to start and progress through the transfer. Remember, most patients can't do this quickly. So it's not like one just slide. They do like 3 or 4 times to get there, okay? You wanna make sure they don't pinch their hands. You gotta keep that hand open. So the hand needs to be flat so they don't get it pinched underneath there. They also, not just only that spot, but the end, they love to put it on the end too. And then when they weight shift over, once they move, they block their hands underneath it. Okay, so make sure you cue them about their hands.
They should be putting their weight either on the armrests of the chair or just
They can put their weight on. They can put their weight on
They
that.
shouldn't grab it.
You just don't want to tuck your hand underneath it.
They can like have flat palm.
Yes.
Pushing
Yeah, they'll
themselves.
end up with a board. You'll see it when we do it down in the lab. You'll put your hand down and you'll kind of scoop yourself over like that. Yep. So they extend the arm, whichever direction they're going. You're going to end up extending the arm out, and you'll shift yourself over, right? Just like that. Yep, you're scooting. That's right. The other thing about this is, let me back up one slide and kind of make more sense. We always want to angling the chair helps. You take your armrest off and you slide your board in, but if you think about it, if we don't have this chair angled, our distance right here where the board's going to end up sitting, it won't be wide enough. you'll end up running into the tire. So we also need that angle of the chair to help with that.
I do have you mentioned earlier that with transfer boards like this, you need to sometimes be used to reduce friction. Would that not be hazardous using their hands because then their hands are also like on the surface?
Oh, like the powder?
Yeah, like wouldn't they be more slippery?
I don't know why it doesn't seem to matter. I haven't seen it. I don't have an answer for that.
Is it because
Most
our
of the time,
hands?
I usually put pants on if I have my choice, or like
Yeah.
something under there.
She was saying hands like sliding on the powder. Is it because our hands produce natural oils that would like help us not slide on the powder?
I guess. I don't have an answer for that one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It doesn't seem to bother me, so.
Okay.
Powder used to be really used, I would say like, I don't know, 10 years ago. I haven't seen it used as much lately, and I don't really know why. I usually, if I get my choice, I put pants on,
What kind of powder was it?
just like baby
Baby
powder.
powder.
It just helps, like, if they're gonna slide
Like,
on
was it with all the cancer lawsuits with the
Probably.
talcum powder?
That's probably it. Yeah, literally, I have no
Like, they
idea.
got sued to death over that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know.
Huh?
Kinda rough on me
Yeah.
getting
Do they just have pants?
Chopping's
Yeah,
like,
usually your
probably
patients
should,
are
like,
gonna
slide
have,
them,
the
or
only
so, like,
people that
adults
aren't gonna have
slide them.
pants are gonna be your people in the
Yeah.
hospital.
In the hospital?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was
So
getting.
that's a good question. Yeah, so she's got a really good question. So where did I get the pants from? So if I'm seeing a patient in the hospital and they just got the gown on, what am I gonna do? I'll be honest, I will probably end up trying to scoot them on their bare skin, but if it's for some reason I'm worried about their skin integrity and this is not gonna go well, I would put it down either like a pillowcase on it to help or the powder on there. That's how I would go about it. But a lot of people that you're gonna end up using a sliding door transfer for are probably gonna be your inpatient rehab, like your rider CP kind of thing. You're gonna use this or at a skilled nursing facility. The person's gonna go home, right? And we want them to be independent. This might be the transfer that they can use and do it at home by themselves, right? So my dad was in a wheelchair for 12 weeks. He broke both legs right after I graduated from PT school and passed my boards. Really smart. 3 days after I passed my boards, my dad fell off a ladder, 25 feet. God bless him, he was my first real patient. Eye-opening experience for all of us. So he's not weight bearing, right? Can't put weight on either leg for 12 weeks, that's a long time. He became very efficient at this, right? And the book doesn't talk about it, I don't know why, but some boards are shorter and there's longer boards. You want a longer board for the car. You want a shorter board for just around the house kind of thing. And the reason there's a hole right here is actually just for being able to carry the board. So there might be boards that don't have holes, don't worry about that. It's just for carrying and making it easy. If patient's gonna need a board for a long term, make sure you talk to them about getting something behind the wheelchair, like a backpack to be able to put it in so that they can use it themselves. But yeah, that's the patient that's gonna use it. I have also had people that, for whatever reason, their leg strength is just not good, and it's not gonna come back, right? Like they're either just so fatigued or they're just not getting it back, or it's a neurological issue that's causing it, and I've taught them sliding door transfers. It's also one of the safest ways to attempt a transfer. If it's the first time and you're at the hospital and this patient's been in bed for a really long time, and you guys have been doing like 2-person max assist stand pivot transfers, and we want to try something different, sliding board transfer is probably one of the very safest ones you can do to see how much they can do. Okay, so if I can, I always put pants on them first. All right, so let's say this patient is, they've used a sliding board for a really long time and they've gotten really good at it. Sometimes they get so good at it, they don't actually need the board anymore. That's gonna be the person that does an independent lateral seated transfer So literally, they never come up. So like a squat pivot, they come up right a little bit and then come over and down. This person, she's going straight from her wheelchair, straight over. Usually this is a spinal cord injury patient that has been doing this for a long time, and they know how to do it, and they just go really quick. So it's just a real quick motion over, okay? So they're just going straight over. Sometimes they don't need the sliding board. The thing though is they have to have really good trunk control to be able to do this without the board. Weight bearing status doesn't really matter, and the surface level doesn't always have to be perfect. So they might be able to go uphill a little bit. I had a gentleman recently, and he was like, "Oh, I do them all by myself. I just do a lateral shift right over." And I was like, "Oh, this is like 4 inches higher. I don't know." But technically, he did it just fine. He was able to just pop himself right over. They've gotten good upper body strength, right? They got good trunk control, and he was able to just go one quick motion. So, but remember, it's it's a straight lateral. He's not coming up, one straight lateral. Their feet may not touch the ground. Her feet are touching, but they may not on that transfer. So it makes sense why you have to have good upper body strength in the past, right? All right, so a clinician-assisted sliding board transfer. For this one, we're going to guard in front. We're going to guard the hips right, and we'll help. We assist with the hips, and then we will direct them and cue them for the distal parts of them, like their hand placement and that kind of stuff, right? If you needed to, so she's guarding the shoulders too, right? Or helping. If I had to help, that patient better have a gait belt on. I know, and you know what makes me really mad? I'm just going to tell y'all this. She's one of my old professors.
Oh.
And I am like, I cannot believe she is showing that picture without having a gait belt on that patient. It just makes me mad. Anyway, she should have a gait belt on. You should be, she should be flexed down, right, in a good stance, blocking those knees. But you can also help shift them over too. So we're going to do that in lab later. But you can actually help move them. And remember, they're going to probably take 3 to 4 times to be able to shift over. All right, pivot transfers. So for a pivot transfer, we're going to rise up, right, some height. We're going to pivot over and then sit, okay? It requires weight bearing of at least one extremity. You can do a squat pivot and not bear weight on the other leg, right? Because we could all just stand here and do that. You can do a stand pivot, right, without having to weight bear either. So you just have to be able to weight bear on at least one extremity to be able to do a squat pivot or a stand pivot. Right? There's videos if y'all want to watch them later when you get home. So for assisting with the pivot transfer, what are we going to do? We're going to make sure our environment's set up beforehand, right? We're going to make sure they have good socks on, those grippy socks, or some shoes. We lock those brakes for the wheelchair. We want to make sure that the surfaces are equal. Make sure you got an angle on your wheelchair. It's going to make it easier when you make that turn. And then make sure you have a gait belt on. Memorize this slide, y'all. You're going to do this all the time in your career, okay? All right, so a pivot transfer, you're going to have the patient, what does the patient need to do? You need to have them scoot forward. We're going to do a lift here in a second, right? So we want them to scoot themselves forward. We want them to tuck their feet back. We want their trunk to flex forward and down, nose over toes, and then your hands. You want our hands to reach through to the back of the belt. We want them to push off from the wheelchair, okay? Sometimes if you've taken the armrest away on the other side, they didn't on this picture, they're allowed to reach over toward it too. So they might just push with one hand and pull with the other, and that's allowed, okay? Or if you leave both wheels, we would prefer, if we're progressing them, we will let them push up with both, because eventually we want them to walk, right? But when they're lower level, sometimes we take that wheelchair arm away so that we can get over quicker to the other surface, and they're allowed to pull themselves as well, okay? Now, the inner foot of the patient is slightly forward and the therapist's foot is back. When I say inner, I'm talking about the direction you're going. So they're going, for the therapist, they're going to the left, right? But I can't say that because the patient's going to their right. So it's which way is the inner way? So her foot is going to be back and his foot will be slightly forward. If you look at the next slide, it kind of helps show that as well. So what happens is if you are like that, if I'm going to the right, when you turn your feet, then your foot will be, if your foot is back and you turn to the right, your foot will be in front then, okay? You also want to turn their feet the direction you're going, so the toes go away, the heels go toward the surface you're going, okay? So if you kind of think about that, doesn't he look like he's already starting to get lined up to go that way? So the heels go toward the inner side as well. So the foot on the patient is slightly forward. Your foot is slightly back to the inner part of the transfer. Does that make sense? All right. For the clinician, we're going to be in the front. We can block the legs and the knees if we want to or feel like we need to. We've got our inner foot slightly back, and we're going to grab that belt, right? Blocking the knees. You don't always have to block, but it helps you with control. It's gonna, it makes it a safer transfer, and you're gonna be able to maintain control of the transfer when you go. It's always okay to overblock. It's not okay to underblock. So when I say that, if the patient says, I have a bad right knee injury from 5 years ago, then you better be blocking that right leg. You can block it. If this is his leg, you can block it with one of yours. You can put 2 of your knees against it, that's fine. But if they tell you that both of their legs are weak, you got their 2 legs are weak, you better have 2 knees on their 2 knees. Or you put them together and you block on the outsides. That's fine too, but you gotta be blocking, okay? So, you can always overblock, that's fine, but you can't underblock. All right, so for assisted pivot transfer, you can count. You might want to rock the patient. Sometimes that's helpful. Then start the momentum. You want them to lean toward you like they're giving you a hug. The goal really is to get the weight on their feet and then help them go over. Okay, so we shouldn't be trying to lift them straight up. We should be weight shifting them onto their feet and then going over. Okay. Also control your descent so they don't just slam onto the mat or whatever. The difference between a standing and a squatting pivot transfer, the real difference, y'all, is how high they come up. Okay? Their hand placement might be a little different because if think about it, if I'm going straight over to something, my hands might be out here, but if I stand up, I might have like to reach more. Or if you look at him, he's going to take a step probably a little bit, so he's not grabbing onto anything once he's all the way vertical, okay? But the real difference between whether it's a squat pivot or a stand pivot is just how vertical the patient got, okay? So, all right, another description of seated repositioning, or another way to do it. Remember the first way was we reach through and we lift them back into the chair. This is how I typically do it. I stand in front of the patient. If they are not all the way back in that chair, I will block their knees. I don't love how her positioning is, but you're going to rock them forward and then with your knees, push them back, okay? You can also, what has happened is she's not able to do both sides, so she's demonstrating rocking the right hip and then rocking the left hip. Sometimes you do have to take multiple times to shift them back, but we want to get them all the way back. I personally, that's how I do it. I've also seen clinicians where it was going to be really tough to shift the person back in the chair. Somebody gets behind and helps lift a little bit, and somebody in front is blocking the knees and then pushing them back too. So you can do it that way as well. really what you feel comfortable with your body mechanics and what you can tolerate. We'll do both down in lab later. So remember, complete the transfer. No transfer is complete until the patient is safely at the next spot. So whether it's laying down or sitting in a wheelchair, they've got to be safe. You want to make sure the hips are back if they're sitting in a chair and they're fully back against the backrest. You want to make sure they have a way to call for help. Okay? This is a disc. These came out about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Think about a lazy Susan. You know what a lazy Susan is, right? So sometimes, especially our neuro patients, I'm not talking about a stroke, I'm talking about like ALS or MS. They might be able to tolerate standing fine, but they're not able, they need help getting up. But then they can't shift their weight, or they can't turn, they can't take a step, they can't move their legs. Like with MS, it's progressed and they can't make that movement anymore, but they can tolerate standing okay. So this is perfect for that patient. What you do is you do a straight sit to stand basically, and then the disc, their feet stay on the disc and it just rotates them for you. I've taught some family members even to use them as well, but you put the disc underneath them. Most of them that I've seen have little straps that the foot sits into and you can Velcro down. You stand them up and then you just turn them. It's that turn motion that they no longer possess, and it's usually from the neurologic disease. So these are helpful. You might see them out in the clinic. There's another one that's square. I don't know what the brand is, but there's a square version of it as well. I've used the circle one. It makes sense that they'd be easier to use too, but anyway, you might see those. So we got some special patients to consider, right? We got patients that are weight bearing only on one side. We got our stroke patients, and we got our posterior hip patients for our total hips, and then our spinal cord injury patients, okay? So for our patients that are non-weight bearing or partial weight bearing, anything like that, we do it a little different. We want them to slide out to the edge of the chair. We want them to extend that leg. It should not be touching the floor before they start to stand up. We want them to hold the non-weight bearing limb off the ground slightly when they do that transfer, and then pivot on the other leg. Sometimes they can even do hops. Either athletic people or guys, or a lot of times they will be able to extend their leg. They might have a crutch or not, but they might be able to hop. I've also had one or two amputees that could do that. So don't be surprised if you see somebody. But you want them to keep that leg out straight so they never contact the ground. And then when they go to sit, make sure it's still out straight. So think about it. It's hard to demonstrate here, but if I'm non-weight bearing on this side and I tuck it under, I'm automatically, when I go to stand up, going to be putting weight on it, right? So we want to extend it out, we want to stand up, turn on it, and keep it out before I go to lower. Because if I touch it down or even turn it underneath me, I'm going to be more likely to put weight on it when I come down, okay? So extension is key on this. For our stroke patients, we're gonna, it's always easiest to transfer to the strong side, okay? So we are gonna let them normally, so this is like a new stroke, right? We're gonna let them go to their strong side if we get the option. Eventually you need to teach them to transfer both ways, but if you're walking in and this is like day 2, they got a PT eval yesterday, and you've got to get them up out of bed, you're gonna go strong side. Okay? The only time this is not correct is if they're a pusher. Okay? There are some strokes that when they don't know where they are in space, you will sit them up and they're pushing themselves. You'll know because they literally look like this. And you're like, sit up straight. And they are literally, they're doing everything they can to push themselves up. They're like, I am sitting up straight. And you're like, no, you're not. So they're a pusher. If they're a pusher and I'm pushing myself that way, go transfer that way, right? Don't try to get them to pull. They're never going to pull. They're literally going to push away from that wheelchair when you give it to them. So go that way. That is the only time you don't go strong side. For our posterior hips, want them to scoot out. Book says 60 to 90 degrees, but technically it's really 90. They shouldn't flex forward past 90 degrees. That gets a little tricky, so we let them stay kind of leaning back. We let them extend that knee out. We don't want them to stand up and flex forward past 90, which is hard, right? So we're gonna have to help them lift up. For this when we start doing gait, you guys will use walkers for it. Always, you're gonna end up using a walker when they stand to do their transfer. That's what's gonna happen. But you've gotta be really careful when they have the walker. Today, we won't use walkers, we're just gonna do that they need like contact guard or something for your transfer. But anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is, when they stand up and turn, you've got to make sure they don't internally rotate the foot, okay? On the next picture, you'll see this gal is turning, right? She's pivoting on that foot, so she's committing internal rotation right there. So the key to that is to make them take little steps or point the toes out on that side. But you gotta kind of turn the feet and keep the feet. So you've gotta cue these patients. The internal rotation is what you really need to know right now, is what we gotta watch for with our transfer, or our stand pivot transfer, okay? All right, for our spinal cord injury, if they're at level C7 or lower, they typically have potential to perform a independent transfer. Seated pivot transfer, their feet will touch the ground, okay? And they're gonna use momentum to help them. So their transfers are faster, y'all, than everybody else, because remember, their legs are kind of like dead weight to them. So once they get their body, they get the momentum of weight shifting forward, they're gonna need to go fast to get the momentum to be able to do that pivot, okay? So they're using a lot of momentum force to be able to do it. You gotta watch for skin integrity for our spinal cord injury. First of all, because they might not feel it, but also because of momentum, they might be shearing their body, and they're making those quick momentum transfers, okay? Kind of talked about it this morning. What transfers, we have to adapt sometimes, like our transfers into the toilet. Remember that you gotta manage the pants too. This is the transfer that most of the time is very stressful, okay? It's very stressful because they're freaking out that they're gonna be incontinent of bowel or bladder. And so they're like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And you're like, slow down, we gotta get this set up. And they are freaking out, and they're gonna be impulsive. They're gonna be trying to push to get over to the toilet because they know as soon as they stand up, it's coming. I typically say, listen, I would rather clean up a mess on the floor than have to pick you up. So let's do this slowly. If you pee everywhere, that's fine. I'll clean it up. I don't care. But I don't want to have to pick you up off the floor. So we're going to slow down. You got to be in control. This is probably one of the most dangerous transfers, okay? Just because they're going to be really impulsive. The other thing is you have to know, like, this patient's max assist to get over here, and I'm doing, 80% of this lift. There's no way I'm going to manage those pants. So I got to get a second set of hands. So my patient tells me they need to go to the bathroom, and I know he's max assist. I'm going to be like, hey, Lindsay, can you come help me with the pants? Because I know I need somebody else to come with me. So that's part of my setup, right? So you got to have somebody to help you manage the underwear and pants for you, okay? How you guys doing? You want a break or keep going? I'll get through car and then we'll take a break, okay? I got no response, so I'm like, look at the big thing about car transfers is, the big thing is you open up the door, right? You're gonna do a pivot transfer. If it's dependent, you can use a sliding board. You just need a long one, right? If they're going to do the transfer, like if they're more independent, you can remove your armrest, move it out of the way. You want to make sure they lock the brakes. If I'm helping with this transfer, I'm in front of him, standing here to help with the transfer. He's allowed to pull on things that do not move, okay? They're going to pull on the seat belt. Everybody loves to grab that door. They're not grabbing that door. That's going to come back and whack everybody, okay? So you've got to cue on where to put them. I'll be really honest, I can't think of a time that I've ever taught somebody a transfer into the car to drive. But I'm sure you might, I don't know. So they're allowed to grab the steering wheel if the steering wheel doesn't move. But the other thing that you really, really, really got to teach your patients is move the chair all the way back, and the back of the chair needs to be all the way down, okay? That way, no matter what their precautions are, whether they're a hip or not, you have the most amount of room in that doorway, okay? So if you got the chair all the way back, and you got the back of it all the way down, you have as much room as possible to be able to transfer in, okay? You can see him, he's starting to stand up to start to transfer right. The key to a car transfer is they need to do the transfer in and sit down, then move their feet in. Everybody wants to, if this is the passenger door and I just open it, everybody wants to throw one leg in and jump in. They can't do that. And I don't know what it is, but everybody tries to do that when you start talking about car transfers. It's like, we haven't done a single transfer like that the whole time you've been here, and now you're going to one leg and like a kick, like stop. So cue them before they start, stand up, turn, you're gonna sit your butt down into the chair of the car, then we're gonna move your legs in. To get out, we're moving your legs out, now we're gonna stand up, okay, and turn. Can you tell I've done this before? It drives me mad. See, I'm telling you, like, you guys think I'm all crazy, and then one day this is gonna happen to you, and you'll be like, oh, she was right. It's like, what are we doing? All right, summary of all that. Remember, we wanted them to weight bear through their lower extremity. When weight bearing through the lower extremity is not advised, we're going to do like a sliding board transfer for them. Okay. They can also do that quick lateral transfer if their feet don't touch the floor, if they're not weight bearing for some reason, or they can do a stand pivot, squat pivot if it's just one lower extremity, right? You can do. Make sure you block your knees if they are talking about weakness on one side or both sides. And then we do special extra things for, like, of course, our strokes and our spinal cords, okay? Why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come to the next step. Full transfer. All right, there's a chair to plinth, there's a chair to floor dependent, or a chair to floor independent, where they can use their upper extremities if the lower extremity movement maybe work or maybe not, okay? And then we can do, yes,
What's a plinth?
plinth.
But it's like a.
What is a plinth?
It's a table that's high.
Okay. Oh, so I'm like, what is
It's
this?
this.
Okay.
That's a plinth.
Okay.
Okay. You're fine.
Oh wait, what? I've been calling that a plinth in the clinic this entire time.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is that. The one you're gonna see on the next one is higher, but this is a plinth table.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's plinth table. The book calls it a plinth. What?
Like, why would you need
Word of the day.
It's probably there's a transfer that we're gonna talk about, and the reason you see it is in the plinth, like in an out like a doctor's office.
Yeah.
They might have it called.
Oh, like.
That's where. So ours are typically about this height, like athletic training and whatever. But
like an exam?
yes, like an exam table might be.
Okay, gotcha. This
All right. So you got an independent with limited lower extremity mobility. They might do a chair to floor or the floor to chair. There's 4 different ways to do the chair to floor. There's 3 different ways to do a floor to chair. We'll go through all. It's a lot. It's a lot. All right. So here's this plinth, this table, right? If the plinth is high, I've only done this one time in my career. I worked downstairs. There was doctors upstairs at this place, and they called down and they said, we got this patient, and our table is so tall, the patient can't get up to it. Can you come help? So we went up there, and I was like, oh great, this is great. I was like, why do I always get in these situations? So we're going to talk about how to get them up onto a taller surface. So basically, if the plinth table is higher than the glute fold, so it's like, let's say up here on me, right? You need to get a step stool, okay? The patient is going to stand up. When you make the decision on what foot should go up on the step, remember the saying, good people go up, bad people go down, right? When they die, right? You'll always remember this for the rest of your life now. So you get to that step or your stairs, and you're like, oh crap, well which foot do we use? Good people go up, so the good foot goes up first. When you're coming down, the bad foot goes down. So think about it. If this leg is my bad leg, and I'm coming down, I'm lowering myself, right, on the good one. But the left leg goes down, okay? All right? When you're going up, you'll be pushing up with that good leg, okay? So remember, good goes up, bad goes down, right? So if the plinth height, the table height is taller than the glute fold, you're going to use a step stool, all right? We're still going to put that gait belt on, right? We're going to get the wheelchair up to it, or do our 30-degree angle right there beside. We'll lock that wheelchair. We want them to stand up first. We want them to put their both feet up on the step, so they get up the step, then they turn, then they sit there, okay? We don't want them like halfway, got one leg up, trying to make the twirls spin to get up there, all right? We let them pivot once they're up on the step, okay? We're still gonna guard them and control them with our gait belt and centrally, okay? When they're coming down, they're gonna do this in the reverse, basically. They're going to, you let the step stool be underneath their foot, or both feet, sorry, they stand up, and then they're going to step down with the bad leg, step down with the good leg, and then turn and sit, okay? So that's the big thing, if that you have to go to some higher surface during a transfer. All right, so for the floor, for a two-person dependent chair to floor transfer, you're gonna remove the armrest and the leg rest first. The clinician behind is going to have their arms go through underneath the armpits and grab both wrists, right? The clinician that is helping with the legs, they get underneath, they're gonna help support the distal calf and the lower part of the leg. So when I say that, I mean, they're not lifting from here, right? We're lifting down here. Both clinicians need to be very careful of their backs in this instant, right? The clinician in the front, they're gonna need to be way squatted really low. The clinician in the back is the one gonna get the count. They're also gonna be straddling the wheel, so they've gotta be really careful as well, okay? I have only needed to do this a couple times. It was for pediatric patient, because again, this isn't super functional, but you might have peds that you need to get them out of their wheelchair onto the floor to be able to work on something, right? So this is the way to safely do it. All right, person in the back is gonna do the count, right? I kinda already talked you through these. You're gonna lift up, and you've got to clear, so we can't go straight lateral, right? So we whack them right in with the wheel. So we're gonna go up and over and then down to the floor, okay? You use good body mechanics, y'all. I mean, just trying to reboot my computer over here, hold on. All right, so we got them down to the floor. How do we get them back up to the chair? You're just gonna do the reverse, right? Again, really need to use good body mechanics to get them back up. You're gonna do just the reverse. Both are squatted down really low. Person in the back is gonna do the count. You're gonna stand up, bring them up and over that wheel, right, and set them in the chair, okay? Hopefully you don't have to do this transfer very often. That would be the goal, okay? Now, most facilities require us to teach people to get up off the floor. I've done it for home health patients. I've done it for skilled nursing facilities, rehab, what have you. I've even had to do it in outpatient. You really need to memorize this, guys, because you will have to do this. I will give you a tidbit that I've learned the hard way. When you have to do a floor transfer, patients fall, right? So you have to teach them to be able to get up off the floor. But you're having to teach this, and you have no idea whether this patient's going to be able to do this or not. Pretty intimidating, right? If your facility has a wide mat, like our blue mat that's downstairs, put the chair on the mat, okay? Patients sitting on the mat, they're technically on the floor at that point. Then have them crawl over and do the transfer up to the chair. If it goes haywire, it doesn't really matter. They're on the mat, right? We're all fine. When I'd been out of school for maybe a year and a half, working in an inpatient rehab like Roger CP's. One of my coworkers got a 350-pound lady. It was family training day. She got the patient down onto the floor, couldn't get the patient up. 3 or 4 of us came over to try to assist, can't get the patient up. Then we tried to get the lift machine. Lift machine's batteries are down. It becomes a real nightmare real quick. So, if your facility has a wide mat, not a mat like this, we ain't putting them on this, right? They got a wide mat, like our blue mat. Put your chair up there, do your transfer training for the floor transfer from the mat. You're gonna save yourself a lot of heartache, okay?
I just
All right.
have one question.
Yes.
On for the dependent chair to floor, why would you be putting a dependent person on the floor?
And so that would be like the only time I can think of that you would need to do that is a pediatric patient.
Okay.
Yeah, like geriatric, somebody who broke their hip, we're not doing any of that. No, this would be like a peds patient that you're trying to work on maybe rolling, you're trying to do something and you don't have a mat in your clinic, so you've got to put them on the floor. There's some neuro teachings that if you start to specialize into neuro stuff, they do want you to get patients into quadruped. You also do a lot of core strengthening in quadruped, and so there are times that you do want people to get down. So it would be a pediatric patient. So, good question. Anything else, y'all? Okay, so how do we teach our patients to get, so if you're teaching a home health patient, you can't do my little trick of starting it on the mat, and you're gonna have to do it like this. What you're gonna do, you have them scoot out to the edge, they kind of tuck one foot in front of the other. You guys can even try it right now. You'll go down, you try to go down into like basically like a lunge position, right? So she's coming down, and you're gonna go to kneeling, and then you can side seat down from there. Okay, we'll go over it in live too though. But you just slowly get them to descend down. Then they're flat on the floor, you get them on the floor. I always teach my patients, if you've fallen and you're on the floor, calm down, you're already there. You're gonna be so freaked out because you just fell and you're like, oh my gosh, you might be. You're on the floor, just breathe. Okay? Then you need to make an assessment of yourself. You physically feel like you could get up. If you say yes to that question, they need to roll over. Roll over to all fours. They crawl over to the chair is how they get there, right? We have them crawl over. They get into what the book will call it, a half kneel. It's a lunge position, y'all. So you got one leg. Once you get to all fours, so if I'm gonna crawl on the floor, we're gonna do this in lab. If you get them onto all fours, then you might need to help them bring the one leg up to like a lunge, right? And then at this point, they just need to shift and get their butt onto the chair, okay? We're gonna do it down in lab, but this lady has crawled over, right? She's using one arm on the armrest. She's got her foot into the lunge, and then we're just gonna get her to swing her hips around and get them onto the chair. That's the safest way to get up from a floor. We want them to choose something that doesn't move, not a rocking chair, not your little twirly chairs right here, right? We prefer a chair that has armrest if we can, because it's gonna help them more during their transition up. Okay. All right. Independent chair to floor, limited lower extremity mobility. All right. This is the patient that's in a wheelchair. They're going to be in a wheelchair probably for the rest of their life, like they just had a spinal cord injury. We've got to teach them how to get down, okay? They're not going to be able to do the same way we just saw with that nice lady, right? They're going to have to do this differently. So we have to teach them to move the casters forward, right? Why do we move the casters forward on the wheelchair?
So the
Increase the
chair
base
tips
of
over.
It
support.
doesn't, it doesn't tip on them. Where's the chair gonna tip? Forward on them, right? So we need to make that base of support bigger, and that's moving the casters forward, okay? So we move those casters forward. Whoops, I'm sorry. They can use their hands if you're doing this first version of getting down. They have their feet in long sitting, the legs stay extended the whole time. Casters are pointed forward, right? And they're gonna lower themselves down. They are allowed to put their hands down on the caster to help lower them so they don't have to go down as far with their hands, okay? They're gonna lower. I'll be honest, you gotta have a lot of upper body strength for some of these, okay?
Do the counselors do you think that they would
I don't think they can have locks. I don't think they usually spin because you're putting so much weight down. So you end up holding it yourself. Yep. But you've locked your brakes right before we even started this, so, yeah. But they won't usually spin on you. All right, so they get down, they'll shift all the way down, and to the floor at this point, right? Now, the alternative to that is, they can tuck their feet underneath them and go into kneeling, okay? So you might teach them to tuck their legs under them and come down. They hold on to the sides of the armrest and they'll lower themselves down. I will tell you, this one is a little intimidating. They're all kind of intimidating me. I feel like my shoulders are gonna kill me, but this one's a little intimidating because you're watching the floor just come straight at you. So once they get to this position, they're gonna go forward into kneeling, into all fours, okay? And then they're into a quadruped position at this point, okay? And then they lower their hips down. All right, now, last way to get down out of the chair would be to turn and do it. So it's a turnaround. They will scoot out to the edge, they rotate their hands, and then they're literally going to rotate their bodies. You need to have a lot of ab strength to be able to do this. They rotate themselves around and then go down to kneeling at that point, okay? So they will be facing backwards to the chair when they're coming down. And then they just lower themselves, and then they're kneeling right, and then they go to quadruped and then all the way down, okay? So how do we do a setup for independent floor to chair if they have limited lower extremity mobility? So this is again our spinal cord injury patient. We're going to position the wheelchair with the casters forward again, right? We block the chair, the brakes. The wheelchair leg rest should have been already gotten off, but we have them off, right? And then they may move the leg rest out of the way if possible. You should have already had them all the way off. But first way to do it is that long sitting again. You have them get all the way back till their back will touch the chair. They put their arms up on the armrest, and then they're going to push themselves up, okay? The shoulders do the majority of the work to lift the body up into the seat here. So they need to have a lot of shoulder strength to be able to do this, okay? If they can't do that, what you end up doing is giving them a stool. They go to the stool, and then from the stool to the chair. So it doesn't take half of the distance away, but it takes quite a bit away. The other option, yes, that's the story I was talking about, sorry, is the turnaround. So on this one, they've crawled over on all fours, they get really close, you turn one of your arms in, if not both of them, and they're going to basically do like a press up, and then real quickly with momentum, they'll twist with their hips and do a turn and come in. So, I was gonna say, you gotta have some good, they end up using momentum, y'all, to be able to do that quick turn. That's how they do it. You gotta get your hands in a good spot. You have to have at least one hand turned in, and then you might have the other hand turned out at that to be able to do that quick turn. You can do two if you wanted to as well, but you gotta have at least one hand turned in. be able to get that turn started, okay? I see your face and I'm like, yeah, this is not my one of choice. Like if I had to, this is the last one I would teach if I was going through the list. I usually do the long sitting one first, then the stool one, and then this is my last report. However, there are some patients that are gonna end up with, all right, so this gets tricky to me. If the patient is a new spinal cord injury, and I'm working at Roger CP's and I'm sending them home, I'm gonna go after one of the basic ways, like the long sitting, the stool, to be able to teach them to get to the floor, okay? However, our spinal cord injuries, they might live with being a spinal cord injury for a long time, and they still have never been taught how to do a floor transfer, and they want to be able to do it. Maybe they want to be able to get down on the floor to pet their dog, I don't know. So, sometimes there are different ways. This is not what you go after in the beginning, but they might wear their AFOs, and this guy's gonna end up, he is like using momentum to rock himself forward, and he goes down, into like a semi kind of quadruped. He lowers himself down doing it that way. Okay, so sometimes our spinal cord injuries, just, they learn a different way to do it. I don't ever go after that until I've tried everything else and it's not working, okay? All right. So our summary, vertical lift include additional challenges because of gravity, right? You gotta have good upper body strength to be able to do a lot of these. We want to make sure that we teach all our patients how to get up off the floor because there is a potential for everybody. The average person falls one time a year. So it is important that we teach them how to get up off the floor, right? And you guys are all gonna remember my trick on how to teach them to get up off the mat for the floor, right? So you don't make the mistake of trying to lift somebody off the floor. You don't have to. All right.
It's a half kneeling position, right?
It's half kneeling. The book calls it half kneeling and then lunge. I would say that's a semi-lunge. That's a lunge to me. You're on the floor lunging. All right, let's go do them.